Okay, in 11.4, we're going to be asked to factor some things, and anytime that you're asked to factor, you'll want to first check to see if there's a greatest common factor. See if maybe you can take a 2 out of everything, a 3, maybe you can take 5 out of everything. Maybe there's a variable that you can take out of every term that you see. So you always want to start with that before you do anything next, before you do anything else. After that, you'll want to see if it's a trinomial, maybe a binomial. These are the ones that we're typically asked to factor. In this section 11.4, you'll mainly be factoring binomials, and there's only 3 ways that we're going to look at to factor binomials. Only 3 ways. If it's not one of these 3 that are listed here before or below, then you'll say not factorable. So difference of squares would be 1, and difference is subtraction. So we're talking about squares that have a minus in the middle. Second option is difference of cubes. So we're talking about 2 cubes that have a minus in the middle. So difference in the middle. And then this last option, sum of cubes, and sum is going to be addition. So difference, subtract, sum, you're adding. And just a little refresher on the things that are squares. Squares are things that you can make by squaring something. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared, 4 squared. And your list of squares might go a little bit larger than that. You can do 11 squared, 12 squared, and so on. Your squared variables start with x squared, x to the 4th, x to the 6th, and you're just going up by 2. So the next one would be x to the 8th, and then so on. Cubes, you make by cubing things. So 1 cubed, 1 times 1 times 1. 2 cubed, 2 times 2 times 2. 3 cubed, 4 cubed, 5 cubed. And then your variable cubes start with x to the 3rd, and then they go up by 3. And then so on. So make sure you have those to reference while you're working on these. First example, we're asked to factor 1 minus 16x squared. Factor, anytime you see that word in the instructions, start with greatest common factor. Here, 1 and 16x squared don't have anything that we can take out of both, really. So no greatest common factor. Second, you'll want to notice that it is a binomial. Binomial has 2 terms, so this is a binomial. And then you want to check which of those 3 is a difference of squares, difference of cubes, or sum of cubes. And if it's not none of those 3, then you just go ahead and say it's not factorable. But in this case, we've got a minus in the middle, so it's definitely not sum of anything. So that can narrow it down to difference of squares or difference of cubes. If you look at your squares list, hopefully you're keeping that to reference it. We've got 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, and then so on. 1 and 16x squared are squares. So since 1 is a square and 16x squared is a square, this is the difference of squares. And the formula for difference of squares, I'll erase part of this. The formula for difference of squares is a minus b and then a plus b. And a is the square root of the first term. So the square root of 1. And then b, of course, is the square root of the second term. So the square root of the 16x squared. So a in this case, the square root of 1 is just 1. B is the square root of the second term. Square root of 16 is going to be 4. The square root of x squared is x. These are the things that can be squared to make that number. So 4, if you squared it, would make 16. X, if you squared it, would make x squared. And as long as you can label what a is, as long as you can label what b is, you're just going to plug those in. So we're saying a minus b, and then a plus b. Number 2, y squared minus 9x squared. First check, greatest common factor. We can't take y out of both terms. So that means there's no greatest common factor. Next, it is a binomial, as almost all of these will be in 11.4. We've got a minus in the middle, so this is definitely difference of something. We've got y squared. Y squared is a square. It would be on the list just like x squared would. 9 is the square of 3. X squared also on the list, so this is going to be difference of squares, which again is a minus b, and then a plus b. That's the formula. A is just the square root of the first term. Square root of y squared is y. And then b, square root of 9 is 3, and then the square root of x squared is just x. So again, once you've got a sorted out, once you've got b sorted out, you're just subtracting them and adding them. So a minus b, and then a plus b. Number 3, 2x squared minus 8y squared. First thing you're going to do when it says factor is check to see if greatest common factor. And then hopefully you notice here we can take 2 out of both of those terms. So you want to start out by taking out a 2, and then we're going to rewrite. So before we do anything with a and b, we're going to take the 2 out and then write the expression without it. So 2, when you take 2 out of the first term, you're left with x squared. 2 out of the second term, if you take 8 divided by 2, you're left with 4. And we didn't take out either of those y's, so we've still got that. Next, we've got that binomial on the inside of the parentheses, so you'll still want to see if you can factor this any further, see if it's a difference of squares, difference of cubes, or maybe sum of cubes. Definitely not sum of anything because we've got a minus in the middle, so maybe difference squares, difference of cubes, and in this case, x squared is a square, 4y squared is a square, so this is the difference of squares again. So a minus b, a plus b. A is the square root of the first term, so we're talking about the square root of the x squared. That's going to be x. And then b, the square root of the second term, so the square root of 4 and the y squared. Square root of 4 is 2, square root of y squared is y. And then we're just taking those a and b, x minus 2y, a minus b, and then a plus b. And then be careful that you don't forget your 2 that we took out in the beginning. Number 4, 25x squared plus 4, and this is kind of a gotcha one. They're gonna see if you're paying attention, because you'll have a lot of the ones where you've got difference of squares, difference of squares, difference of squares, and you might be in the habit of just treating these all the same, but make sure you go through your normal steps, see if there's a greatest common factor. In this case, 25 and 4 don't have anything in common. Next, it is a binomial, so you'll want to identify which of those 3, if any, that this one is. So I'm just going to write these out. We've got difference of squares. We've got difference of cubes. And then we've got sum of cubes. So difference is minus. So since we have a plus in the middle, this is definitely not difference of anything. So that rules out 2 of them. And then you can look in to see if it's sum of cubes. But don't just assume that it's sum of cubes. You'll want to look at the numbers that you've got there. Here we've got 25x squared. And if you look at your list of cubes, 1, 8, 27, 64, 25 is not on that list. 4 is not on that list. So this is sum, but it's not cubes. So it turns out it's not this third option either. And since we didn't factor out a 2 at the beginning or anything like that, there's nothing that we can do to factor this. This is one of those ones that's going to be not factorable. You just click that button and you're done with that one. And by the way, this will come up for sure on your homework. I've seen it on a lot of the tests. So just got a plus in the middle of a binomial, and generally if they're squares, you're not going to be able to factor that. Number 5, 8y cubed plus 27. Greatest common factor, 8 and 27 don't have anything in common. Second's a binomial. And again, we've got this plus in the middle, so it wouldn't be difference of squares, it wouldn't be difference of cubes, but it could be sum of cubes. I'll put a question mark on that. So sum, it definitely is. If you look at your cubes list, you got 1, 8, 27. So both 8 and 27. And also with your variables, you've got y cubed, y to the 6th, y to the 9th. So y cubed and also 8 and 27 are all cubes. So this is sum of cubes. The sum of cubes formula involves a and b also. I'll write this here. We've got a plus b, and then a squared minus ab plus b squared. And again, once you figure out what a and b are, it's just a matter of plugging those in. A is going to be the cube root of the first term. So we're talking about the cube root of this 8y cubed, the cube root of that. And then b is the cube root of the second term. So the cube root of this 27. So a cube root of the first, the cube root of 8 is 2. 2 times 2 times 2 is what makes 8. And we also have to consider the y cubed part. So the cube root of y cubed is just y. Y times y times y makes y cubed. And then b is the cube root of 27. Cube root of that is 3. So there's your a and your b, and you're just plugging them into this formula right here. A plus b, I'll do that in yellow. A plus b. And then you'll notice in the formula we've got a squared. So if your a consists of sort of two parts, you've got 2 and you've got y, make sure that you're squaring both of those. If that's what a is, you have to square both parts of it. So we're going to square the 2, square the y. And then from there you're subtracting ab. So when you put a, b next to each other, that means we're multiplying a and b. So we're multiplying 2y and 3. And then we're going to add whatever b squared is. So b is 3. If we square that, you get 9. And that's all there is to it. Number 6, 81y cubed minus 3x cubed. Greatest common factor. Can't take y out of everything, can't take x out of everything, but the 81 and the 3, if you check with your calculator, they're not both even, but you can take a 3 out. And one quick way to check if 3 goes into a larger number, if you just add the digits here, 8 and 1, that makes 9, which gives you an indication that 3 goes in. If you add them in the digits of a larger number and you get 12, that means that 3 goes in, since 3 goes into 12. If you add a number like 12, 1 and 2, you add those, you get 3. Since 3 goes into 3, 3 also goes into 12. So once you notice that 3 is the common factor, take that out. And then rewrite it. 81 divided by 3 is 27, and we've still got those y's there. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. and I'll just put the x cubed there with no 1 in front. You don't need that. And then going forward, you do have a binomial inside that parentheses, so try to factor that if possible. Remember those 3 ways that you can factor a binomial: difference of squares, difference of cubes, and then sum of cubes. Definitely not sum of anything, because we've got a minus in the middle there. So not sum of cubes, but it could be difference of squares or difference of cubes. If you look at your 2 lists, your list of squares, your list of cubes, you'll see that this is not difference of squares. 27 is not a square, it's a cube. So here we've got the difference of cubes. And the formula on that is very much like the formula for the sum of cubes, except instead of a plus b, it starts with a minus b, since we're talking about difference here. And then the rest of it, a squared plus ab plus b squared. So make sure you write down both of those formulas. They're very similar, but really just these parts are different. You've got a minus and then a plus to start out. Difference of cubes, and it's the opposite for sum of cubes. So you just want to list what a is. A is the cube root of the first term inside that parentheses, cube root, first term of the binomial. Cube root of 27 is 3. Cube root of y cubed is y. And then b, we're talking about the cube root of x to the third, which is just x, since x times x times x makes x cubed. Once you've got those, plug those in. So we've got a minus b, just looking at our formula here. A minus b, and then a squared. Remember I said when a is got 2 parts to it, you want to square both of those things. So we're squaring the 3, also squaring the y. And then plus ab. Ab, we're multiplying 3y and x. You could write 3yx, just butt them up against each other like that. Typically though, if you've got variables, you'll want to put them in alphabetic order. And then plus b squared. And since b is x, we're just going to square it. And you may get very focused on factoring that difference of cubes, but still, don't forget your 3 that we took out in the beginning. Number 7, 9 plus 12x plus 4x squared. Still go through your normal steps when it says to factor the given polynomial or something like that. You see the word factor. Start with greatest common factor. 9 and 12 have a 3 that you can take out, but 3 doesn't go into 4. Nothing in common to all these. Next, another thing, a lot of these are going to be binomials, but they will put in trinomial here and there. This one's a trinomial. And you may remember from a previous section, trinomials will factor into 2 parentheses in a lot of cases. And if you've got a plus and plus up there, you can go ahead and insert plus and plus in there. So the first thing in both of these has got to multiply to be 9. That could be a few things. It could be 1 and 9, could be 3 and 3. Most likely, it's going to be 3 and 3. The last 2 things there have to multiply to be this last thing here. So with the x squared, you know it's going to be x and x. We've got to have that on the end there. Your numbers could be 1 and 4. They could be 2 and 2. Probably going to be 2 and 2 though. And you can check that once you've put it in by multiplying on the inside. 2x times 3 would give you 6x. And then 3 times 2x would give you another 6x. And this does happen to add to be that middle term there. So you got 3 plus 2x and then 3 plus 2x. You could put that answer in, but since they're identical, one of the things the computer may show you if you go through the practice is that you can write this squared, 3 plus 2x squared. And either one of those answers is fine. Number 8, 9y squared minus 6xy plus x squared. Greatest common factor, 9 and 6, you could take a 3 out, but there's nothing on that x squared that you can take a 3 out of, so no common factor to all of these. Next, it is a trinomial. So 2 parentheses, and then we'll work this out from there. So the first thing in both those parentheses has to multiply to be 9y squared. The y squared part, we're going to get from y and y. And the 9 could be 1 and 9, or it could be 3 and 3. We'll go in 3 with 3 and 3 to start with. We don't have plus and plus up here, so I'm not going to put those signs in just yet. The last 10 things in both of those have to multiply to be x squared. So x and x. And then you can multiply these, 3xy, multiply the outside ones. That'll give you 3xy also. If you're needing to get negative 6xy, then both of these will need to be negative. So they add to be negative 6xy. And that'll tell you what your signs up above need to be. So these need to be minus. And again, you could write that, since they're identical, 3y minus x, 3y minus x, you could write as 3y minus x squared. Number 9, 9y to the 4th plus 12x squared y squared plus 4x to the 4th. GCF, can't take 3 out of everything, can't take x out of everything, can't take y out of everything. Trinomial. Going to factor into 2 parentheses like that. First thing in both those parentheses has to multiply to be 9y to the 4th. So numbers wise, you'll probably have 3 and 3. The y to the 4th part though, that'll need to be y squared times y squared. Remember here, at this point, your y's will need to multiply by adding the exponents. So y squared and y squared. Also up here, we've got plus and plus, so you can put those signs in. Last things have to multiply to be 4x to the 4th. So the numbers will likely be 2 and 2. And in order to make x to the 4th, you need x squared and x squared. And you can check that down below. If you multiply, you can just do the numbers. 2 times 3. Down below, 2 times 3. And that would give you that 12 that you need up top. And also you could write this, since they're identical, 3y squared plus 2x squared. Squared.